Last year, global GDP declined by 6.7% as a result of COVID-19. Malaysia certainly wasn't spared. Both manufacturing and construction industries were severely affected. Department of Statistics Malaysia reported that manufacturing output for 2020 has declined by 3.96% from 2019, and the output from the construction industry shrank by 17.2%. We've discussed overall data trends in the Southeast Asian region, and we've discussed what Malaysia is doing to update our infrastructure. This panel will discuss how the manufacturing and construction players have responded to COVID-19 in Malaysia, how the Malaysian government is supporting the players, and how should the industries move forward to improve production output in a post-pandemic age. Our first distinguished guest of the power panel is definitely a force to be reckoned with in the Malaysian manufacturing ecosystem. Yang berbahagia Dato Gan Teck Kong is the executive chairman of a leading ground nut producer from Ipoh, Perak, Ngan Food Industries. Dato Gan is also the vice president of the Federation of Malaysian Manufacturers. Our second guest at this panel discussion is currently the associate head of the Energy, Geoscience, Infrastructure and Society School and head of lab operations at Heriot-Watt University's Malaysia campus. Professor Dr. Satesh Namasivayam has over a decade's worth of experience in higher education. Dr. Namasivayam is also a professional engineer with a practicing certificate registered with the Board of Engineers Malaysia. Our third guest is Mr. Sivasuriyamoorthy Sundara Raja, who is the Deputy Executive Officer of Malaysia's Investment Development Authority, or MIDA. Mr. Siva has been with MIDA for about 33 years, and amongst many of his projects, he was also involved in the formulation of policies and guidelines for the establishment of domestic investments fund to accelerate the shift of Malaysian-owned companies in high technology industries. And our fourth guest is the Group Chief Financial Officer of MMC Corporation. At MMC, Encik Badrulhisyam Fauzi is also responsible for group strategy, group risk and integrity management, and the Information Systems Department. Encik Badrul is a chartered financial analyst, a charter holder of the CFA. He is also a chartered global management accountant. Last but not least, the speaker moderating the panel discussion is John Lau, the co-managing partner of Roland Berger's Southeast Asian practice. John has over 25 years of consulting and industry experience, working for clients across Asia, US, Europe, and the Middle East on national and industry transformation, corporate strategy, as well as digital and workforce transformation. Ask for a more powerful lineup of speakers to discuss the recalibration of manufacturing and construction industries for the age of the never normal than this. If you have any questions for the panel, again, do not ever be shy. Please post it in the box or in the comment section. All right, John, I'm sure the audience is very eager to hear and learn from this panel, so take it away when you're ready.
Thank you very much, MC. A very warm welcome to everyone. Thank you for dialing in. It's my pleasure to moderate this session, and of course, also my honor to be here together with the four esteemed panelists as introduced. So, just a little bit of background: the COVID-19 viral pandemic is an unprecedented global phenomenon that we all know. It's also a highly personal experience, for all of us, with a lot of wide-ranging effects. The pandemic disrupted lives across all countries, communities, negatively affected our global economic growth in the past and a half year, and nothing that we have, really experienced, in nearly a century. Last year, global GDP declined by about 6.7%, and Malaysia certainly wasn't spared. And both the manufacturing and the construction industry was severely affected. Some statistics from the Department of Statistics on Malaysia reported that the manufacturing production index fell by 2.7% in 2020, and the manufacturing output for 2020 was 75.1 billion, and again, a 4% decline from 2019. In the construction industry, however, the output shrank by 17.2%, and it brought the construction industry to basically to a standstill across many parts of the country, of course, owing to the impact of the containment measures. So let's first start the discussion on the manufacturing and the construction players and how they have responded to COVID-19 in Malaysia, and how the Malaysian government is supporting the players. And we all know that the manufacturing sector is a significant contributor to our nation's export revenue and job creation. So I think the first question to Mr. Siva, from an investment perspective, how has COVID-19 impacted domestic and foreign investments? What are some of the initiatives that the government is focusing on to ensure that the sector will continue to be competitive in terms of productivity, innovation, and talent development?
A very good morning to all. Thank you, John. First and foremost, I would like to thank, of course, Star Media Group as well as Roland Berger for inviting MIDA to participate in this what you call Star Biz Summit. As you know, MIDA is actually the investment promotion agency at the federal level, given the responsibility to attract investments into Malaysia. We have been in this business for the last 54 years, and we have 20 centers worldwide. And of course, we target companies, especially the foreign investments, to come and invest in Malaysia. And of course, at the same time, we are also given the responsibility to promote domestic investment as well. So it is both FDI as well as DI. Now, having said that, let us look at our performance over the last, let's say, 5 years or 6, 7 years. In any given year over the last 7 years, I would say the total investment that we approve in the economy is about 200 billion a year. In fact, in 2019, the investment figure was 211.4 billion. That is the total investment that we approve in the manufacturing, services, and the primary sectors. Okay. Now, approval figure is very important because that shows the interest and also the level of investments that will be realized in the coming years. However, last year, due to the pandemic and COVID, of course, there was a decline. And the total investment that we approved last year was 167 billion ringgit Malaysia. So there was a drop of about 20 to 21%. But then the investment that we approved in the manufacturing sector, surprisingly actually recorded a higher level of 10.3% compared to 2019. And of course, the foreign direct investment also increased by about close to 4 to 5%. Despite pandemic last year. But this year, if you look at the January to June figure, I think the investment figure was exceptionally high. That is basically because we were able to attract quite a number of foreign direct investments into Malaysia. And we believe that by end of this year, the overall investments in the manufacturing sector will be much, much higher, even from 2019 figure. That is basically because, as you can see, there is a surge of what you call companies, existing companies in the semiconductor industries, as well as new investment coming in, particularly in the electronic industry. So therefore, we are very confident the figure for this year will be much, much better. That is for the manufacturing. Overall economy also, I believe, we may be able to achieve the 200 billion target that we have been achieving over the last couple of years. Now, in terms of initiatives undertaken, as all of us are aware, one of the major initiatives undertaken by the government was through Penjana, what you call stimulus packages. All in all, I think there were 8 packages that was introduced with a total, what you call value amounting to 530 billion. And most of these were, of course, were focused on industries as well, especially to keeping the industries moving. The employees are also being given some kind of benefits. So the employers were taken care of, I would say, although it was not 100%, but to reduce the impact of the COVID, and of course the moratorium and whatnot. So there were a lot of initiatives undertaken at a very high level. In terms of investment incentives, for example, there were 2 major announcements made last year. And MIDA was very much involved with the Ministry of Finance when these were announced. First was the relocation incentives. We wanted to attract as much as possible investment coming from overseas, especially from China, production capacity to Malaysia. So 0% tax incentive for a period of up to 15 years were given for investments ranging from 300 million to more than 500 million. That is number one. But what is more important, I would say, is that for the very first time, the government agreed to provide a special reinvestment allowance. As we all know, tax incentive under the PIA as well as Income Tax Act are given only for a period of 5 years, maybe up to 10 years. In a very special case, it goes to 15 years. But automatically after that, what happens? All the manufacturing companies are eligible for reinvestment allowance for a period of 15 years. That is given automatically for the company. But after 15 years, what happens? No more incentives granted. So that was the reason why we said that companies who have been here, especially the Malaysian-owned companies or even foreign companies have been here for 20, 30, 40 years, they need to be given special incentive. And therefore, special reinvestment allowance were granted for year of assessment 2020, 2021, and 2022. And of course, I'm glad to note that in the recent budget, that was extended another 2 more years. All in all, another 5 years. Yeah. So that is something that is has helped, I would say, because now we can see a lot of existing companies are also reinvesting, especially in those industries that no longer we give incentives like rubber, gloves, and whatnot. Yeah. And beside all these things, there were also other initiatives undertaken. During COVID, I think we were working with some of the local companies like Medivan, DF, as well as IMF Group to ramp up, to produce a lot of medical devices related products during COVID. Yeah, that was very successful, number one. Number two, we went digital. MIDA went digital. Today, all applications are done through online. It's very transparent. Application for manufacturing license is issued within 3 working days. That was also one initiative under Penjana. We set up PACU, Project Acceleration and Coordination Unit. Yeah? Today, each and every project that MIDA approve, manufacturing projects, 1,000 projects we approve a year, are being tracked through PACU, a system where the local authorities, state government, and the federal government can view. Yeah? Now, we have projects which have been implemented within 7 months. It used to take 24 months, but within 7 months, we have cases like Aspen Glove in Kulim High Tech Park was actually implemented within 7 months from the day they signed the lease and they got the license until they go into commercial production. Another point I would like to highlight is that domestic local sourcing initiative, yeah? Because each and every foreign company that comes into Malaysia, we want them to source as much as possible with local companies and local. It can be foreign companies or local companies in Malaysia. So the domestic local sourcing is very high in our agenda because the local companies were very badly hit during the COVID. And of course, talent. As you know, we involve very much into talent. We do a lot of career fairs. We work with SOCSO. In fact, recently there was this initiative by MIDA through MIDA Assessment Development Center. Yeah, we want to generate about 500 IoT generalists for Industry 4.0. Yeah, that is one new initiative undertaken by MIDA. We have also gone what they call, we want to digitalize our industrial parks. Yeah. So we spend quite a big sum together with Telecom Malaysia as well as Maxis to digitalize 37 industrial parks in Malaysia. So all these industrial parks will have a high-speed broadband of 1 gigabyte per second capabilities. Yeah? As we attract more investment into the industrial parks, the infrastructure must be there in order for them to actually cater for this kind of high-tech industrial projects. And finally, we set up one-stop center for business travelers. This is actually a very noble initiative, very high risk, agreed by the Economic Action Council, then by the Security Council, and of course by the Cabinet. Yeah? This one-stop center for business travelers allows business travelers to enter during pandemic without quarantine, provided they are here only for maximum 14 days. We went live with the whole thing in October last year. The system went live for March of this year. And over the last 1 year, we have facilitated about 3,000 short-term business travelers. Thousands of companies have come in. And the total investment figure that we have facilitated that I can tell here is about 120 billion ringgit Malaysia. Without this business traveler center, I can tell you it would have taken much longer time for actually to revive the economy. And we would not be able to approve all these projects. ATNS is a classic example from Austria, investment 8.5 billion. Negotiation done during COVID time, last November. Groundbreaking was done just about 2 weeks ago, a month ago, I think, in Kulim. Yeah? And all this was done during pandemic. And there are more and more companies that can highlight that we will manage to actually to bring in during COVID due to the initiative undertaken by the government, and of course by MITI and MIDA. So maybe I'll stop at that, John.
Thanks, Mr. Siva. Yeah, very good to hear the various initiatives and how the government is supporting the industry, both foreign as well as the domestic players, and the push, for digitalization, the push for helping the local suppliers, to be part of the ecosystem. Next, we've been in the pandemic for about a year and a half now. The next question I'd like to pose to Dato Gan. What have been some of the biggest challenges from the manufacturing sector, from the players' perspective, and how the industry players, including yourself, have responded and addressed, these challenges, Dato Gan? Sorry, Dato, I think you're on mute.
Okay, thank you very much, John, for having us this morning. And just want to say hello, good morning to our distinguished panelists. So I'll just begin with saying that there's no dispute that the unprecedented phenomenon of this COVID-19 pandemic has done so much damage, one way or the other, to the business community, and it has drastically affected on the business community. We find that the SMEs actually took the brunt of the problem. According to the Department of Statistics, SMEs actually accounted for 1,139 number of companies, of which 97.2% is actually the total business establishment. And it is also important here because 66.2% of the workforce actually comes from the SMEs, and 38.3% it also contribute to 33.3% of the GDP. As you know, that the SMEs are mainly micro, small. So I think let us just look at some of the challenges right now. What companies were facing during this pandemic. I would like to differentiate it into phase 1 and phase 2. Remember when it all just started. During that time, that only the essential sectors were allowed with MITI under approval, stringent approval. Then only by August 16th, 2021, all companies in the manufacturing sector, whether it's essential or non-essential, are allowed to resume operation. That is based on the percentage of the employees which are fully vaccinated. Okay. We find that there are some inconsistency in this policy. And as a matter of fact, the interpretation of these SOPs and the policies by various government agencies has somehow created a nightmare, for companies. When they were audited, it has come to a situation which was so bad that some of the companies, even with MITI's approval, they choose not to operate. And as a result of that, they will lose production, loss of business, loss of manpower in the manufacturing. Probably the third issue that I would like to talk about is, since the industry is not able to maximize productivity, following NRP 1 and 2, because NRP 1, you only get 60% of the employees who are working, only allowed to work. And the other phase 2, only 80% are supposed to work. And by allowing workers to work from home, you'll find that this is actually restricted to office staff. And you can't expect production workers to work from home because they basically have to work from office. And as a result of that, I think this will actually severely affected many of the companies' cash flows because they all have to pay salary. I mean, the challenges what transpired during this pandemic period, I could actually go on hours to talk about. But basically, I'll just sort it out into some main challenges. Most of the companies that was facing were actually there was a shortage of cash flows. There is difficulties to fulfill contracts. Contracts, you can't get workers to work. How are we going to do those contracts? And as a result, penalties will be imposed. There's actually a shortage of inputs. Even though I need to do something, I'm from the essential. I'm not able to get products to come in, and the worst comes is the shortage of workers, whereby you just can't get workers. Hence, as a result of that, the negative impact becomes that as a result, there is actually a reduction in the inability of the company to also deliver. And as a result of that, the value chain system is also disrupted. And the other one is probably since cash flows is affected, there are problems with SMEs getting loans. And some of the SMEs became so bad, they don't know what to do. And we have to make what we call discussion with Bank Negara to sort it out, to ensure that the SMEs would actually approach the bank first before waiting for deadlines to come, whereby the banks will not be able to furnish whatever they want at the end of if you are late. Okay? So now many industries, both in the essential and the non-essential, customers were not able to function as a result of these unclear policies which the government had given. Now, as I say that from the MIEL report that we have, 70% of the SMEs who is actually receiving grants from the Special Relief Fund, actually only 1/5 benefit. And the impact on the GDP, I'm sure, MITI under Mr. Sivasuriyamoorthy. I'm sorry, I couldn't pronounce your name. I think you would actually testify that the GDP impact, according to Bank Negara, is from -2% to 0.5%. Industrial output has been reduced between 40 to 70% during this. And they also projected that there will be negative growth in the manufacturing sector, as much as 5.6%. Now, since we are talking about the impact, just also like to briefly say about the impact on investment. No doubt, MITI would have figures. But just to tell you that we export exports to decline by 13.6% in 2020, compared to 1.1% in 2019. Private consumption, the expansion is actually slower now. 2020 is 4.2%. 2029, that is the previous year, is 7.6%. And in 2018, we're talking about 8%. Okay. We also felt that the strongest impact in the classes of industries, I think the textile and the footwear bear most of the brunt. And also the food, furniture, paper products, and printing. I think these are attendants. We get the multinationals to come and help out SMEs. I think that could be one way that we could actually help it out. in future. And probably companies can actually look into new markets. Probably companies can actually go from offline to online to sell their products. It's actually one way to do that. But let's hope that fourth wave of this pandemic will not come back. If we were to come back, then we will have. And it looks like Europe is now having their problem. And there is a very good chance Europe will have to be locked down. But if Europe locks down, then it will affect the economy in Malaysia. So I think the one way that we can actually prevent, companies have got to do their job. I'll just say some of the few things that, according to the MIPR report, these are some of the things that probably companies have to watch out. Number one, I think we have to ensure that all employees must be fully vaccinated, including booster shots in 2020, right? As you know, that Sinovac, it's only about 3 months. I think for those that are not vaccinated, I think they have to go forward to do so. You need to continue with the existing COVID-19 SOP, despite all employers are fully vaccinated. So you have to put on a mask when you go to work. So all the guidelines must still be. We have to continue periodic testing. And some people, they're testing it on some on a bi-weekly basis. And we find that the government have actually done a lot of good by reducing test kits. Remember one time it was 30 over ringgit, down to 6 ringgit something, and my latest pricing is you can actually get it for $4. So I think this is the responsibility of the company to test their workers on a weekly basis or bi-weekly basis to ensure that everyone is safe. And I think we should all restrict ourselves from overseas travel from 2022. And we also want to ensure that the housing, under Act 446, that I think companies will have to invest. And I also understand that under the HR department, we have been in negotiation with government to work out the problems regarding Act 446, whereby new hostels or new guidelines can be implemented here to control over our focus. Thank you. I think I've spoken quite a bit. Thank you.
Thanks, Dato Gan. Yeah, I think thanks for sharing that the Malaysian manufacturing players and the industries are part of the global supply chain ecosystem, and there are a lot of things that is beyond just Malaysia. And also thanks for some of the suggestions on how we should continue moving forward. Next, I think let's hear from Encik Badrulhisyam from MMC. Being a large infrastructure, ports, utilities, property and engineering company in Malaysia, how did COVID-19 specifically impacted the group, and what were some of the tactical responses that the group embarked on in terms of maybe R&D, innovation and digitalization? Encik Badrulhisyam.
Thank you, John, and good morning, everyone. So today's session is about manufacturing and construction, and I felt like MMC is an integral part to it because obviously our ports and logistic businesses is very closely tied to the manufacturing activities, and utilities, of course, we are supplying those utilities to the nation for the industrial part of it. And of course, we are also in engineering and construction during this period. But the beauty of being a conglomerate is, again, our different part of our businesses are affected differently, but most of our businesses are considered essential services, and we have been able to operate during the various phases of lockdown throughout the year. But of course, with a very strict SOP and requirement to make sure the safety of our employees. So if I just strictly cover a few of the items that we have experienced and done over the last years. So on our ports businesses especially, yes, this is very closely related to what Dato Gan has mentioned about the manufacturing activities. So we did see, of course, some slowdown in import and export during the period of the lockdown. But as of today, I think with the reopening of the global and domestic economy, we are seeing a lot of demand recovery. So this is the part where, as businesses, we must be able to scale down and scale up our operation very effectively. So during this difficult period, obviously, efficiency is key to all our operations. So we have seen that during this period, a lot more data crunching, data analytics, data analysis are being thrown into the picture when we're talking about scaling up and scaling down our operation almost instantly in that sense. Of course, besides planning for the workforce, there is a lot of planning as well on our equipment side. So efficiency is key, and we have seen that a lot of decision making now require a lot of data that before this is there, but it's not being utilized. So I think as we are today, we are lucky in the sense that even before the pandemic period, we have been investing into digital technology, upgrading our terminal operating system, and actually upgrading our ERP system as well. So in fact, as we speak today, we are actually investing into making sure that IoT data from our equipments are integrated into our ERP so that we can have a holistic view of our operation and decide accordingly. And of course, if you talk about the port system before this, automation has always been a key industry discussion, but retrofitting automation into existing infrastructure could be expensive. So we are working towards that, and one of the areas that we are looking very closely, of course, with the pandemic where there is shortages of workers, so automation on prime movers, for example, autonomous prime movers and all, we're looking at proof of concept, how we can do that in Malaysia. So we have seen that on the port side, which is very related to the manufacturing, yes, this is some of the challenges, and I think it has come to the point where we are no longer doubtful about the need for automation. So that's definitely the way going forward. And if you talk about our utilities business, on the other hand, of course, this is a lot more less complicated in terms of operation, but this is the part where eventually Dato mentioned just now about working from home and all. So there is a lot more emphasis on remote access to operating data for us to enable decision making. So before this, all this cybersecurity and data integrity is just something that you have in risk management meeting. So now it's something that is real, where we have to make sure that all the security protocols and the ability of the staff to actually access this data become a paramount issue. And if you talk about engineering and construction, which we of course directly involved, we have seen that before this, of course, we have been implementing BIM, and that's something that over the years that we are adopting seriously, and this has enabled us to make sure that all the work that we have done during this pandemic period with strict SOPs in terms of the staff, we are able to ensure that there is minimal wastages. And if you talk about designing structures, and particularly underground and tunnel and all, before this, I don't think we are relying on as-built drawing as much anymore, and we have to take the step to do 3D scanning so that we are able to demonstrate the structure and the quantity that is needed in much more complete way. And as part of the overall investment as well, we have also invested into modular steel structure fabrication to make sure that we are able to expedite the construction process. So in summary, if I may, John, I think what we have seen is this is the part that probably some of us have seen some WhatsApp messages about what has actually propelled digital transformation. COVID-19 is the answer that has enabled companies like us that to make sure that we are now accelerating our investment into digital infrastructure. And obviously, this is about making sure that it's not just investment, but we must be able to optimize our decision making. And this is obviously something that we are exploring and pursuing, where we have to be machine-assisted decision making, doing predictions and scenario evaluation. And hopefully, over time, this helps us to innovate our business model for better going forward. Thank you, John.
Thanks, Badrulhisyam. Yeah, I think thanks for a lot of lessons on the need to digitalize, the need to leverage data, and I think it's also probably fortunate that a lot of your businesses are deemed essential. So probably I think fortunate for a big group like MMC maybe a little bit different scenario, like what Dato says, right? A lot of the SMEs are the ones that that are probably more impacted, and sometimes, yeah, because of cash flow reasons, they may not be able to leverage, the opportunity during pandemic. But thanks anyway, and I think a lot of lessons, same. We need to go online. And now let's talk about, on the topic of technology. Let's move the discussion to see how that technology can potentially help us to survive better. And we have seen a lot of progress in terms of advancement in technology, especially in the past few years, right? How it can help companies to embark on, their various digital transformation programs, like what you have just mentioned, Badrul. So today we are talking about, right, connected systems, robotics, autonomous, vehicles, 3D printing, the usage of big data, etc. So the question to Prof. Satesh, as a lecturer focusing on engineering, how has technology progressed, and what are some of the new engineering topics that industry players can look forward to in the near future?
Thanks, John, for the question, and very good morning to everybody on the panel as well. It's a real pleasure to be here, albeit virtually. So I think as an academic with Heriot-Watt University's Malaysia campus, first I'd like to thank the STAR, obviously, and its co-organizers for the opportunity to speak on today's topic. So coming to the question, John, I think in terms of the progression of technology, I think it's safe to say it's been immense. I mean, you look at what the world and its innovators has been able to accomplish towards the end of the 20th century and into the 21st century. The contribution is huge. Looking at the first decade within the 21st century, we very clearly saw how these technologies brought together Industry 4 and how that's driving us, obviously, where we are now. I suppose in terms of what would be the engineering topics of interest to both industry and also for academia, I think generally speaking, there are many challenges and issues that exist globally, which requires us to innovate and collaborate on. I mean, for example, we are all aware of the UN Sustainable Development Goals and how these are, very broad-based challenges that would need to be addressed over a specific period of time in order for us to progress as humankind. But I think specifically for engineering in particular, we actually have 14 grand challenges for engineering, which are essentially challenges announced by the National Academy of Engineering about 12 years ago. And these 14 grand challenges, some examples are making solar energy economical, reverse engineering the brain, enhancing virtual reality, and providing access to clean water. And there's a few more. And really these challenges, what we as engineers are saying, if these aren't addressed and solved by the end of the 21st century, then obviously our survival in the 22nd century as human race would be threatened. So I believe that, using the grand challenges as a base, these would essentially serve as the key engineering topics currently and also for the future. And, speaking as an academic within my university, for example, in our undergraduate degrees within engineering, the grand challenges for engineering permeate through the curriculum and the assignments so that our students who are future engineers are very much aware of the key engineering topics when they leave us and work within industry. And obviously within the university, we have research strengths that focus on more specific challenges, which we've all heard about over the last 5 years. For example, decarbonization, achieving net zero, as well as energy transition. So I think in summary, John, I think there's actually a wealth of challenges currently and also for the future that would cater for the progression of technology and what we have available. And I think, this would only support the restart of certain industries as we are moving through the recovery caused by the disruption of the pandemic. So I think that's what I would have to say, John. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Prof. Yeah, I think we'll touch. I mean, very good point that you raised. Making sure that the future technology is not just addressing, industry challenges, but the sustainability of the planet, and making sure that the new technologies are also working on that. And I think it's a very good topic which we will touch on a little bit later. Moving to Mr. Siva, there are various programs and initiatives that the government has launched, as you mentioned earlier, as a catalyst, to support the companies to transition, into smart manufacturers or smart companies. Can you briefly explain what are some of these programs and facilities so that, and how successful they are, so that, the participants today will roughly know where to go and where to seek some of this support?
Thank you, John. But before I answer your question, I would like to share with you an incident that happened during, I think this happened maybe 2 years back when I was a panelist in one of the, I think, budget event, Deloitte, PwC, EY, always they have this huge event, in the hotels. So during that panel discussion, there was one question posed to me by one of the, participant. And he asked me, point blank, tell me, what's in it for me to adopt Industry 4.0? I was taken aback, so I told him, very simple, your survival. Yeah. So you don't need the government to give you money to adopt Industry 4.0. Yeah? The mindset must be there that, you have no choice. If you're SME, if you're supplying to multinational corporation, if you don't adopt on Industry 4.0 technologies, you don't adopt IoT, you don't adopt, let's say, cybersecurity, you don't adopt, big data, you will miss the opportunity. In 5 years' time, maybe you'll be struggling. In 10 years' time, maybe you'll be out of the business. Yeah. So it is a matter of survival, I would say, rather than a choice. Yeah. So that, having said that, let us look at what MIDA has done. First thing first, you need to have a policy formulation. So MIDA has, although MIDA is actually an investment promotion agency, through and through, I always say this to all people, all business community, even among MIDA officers, we are actually a marketing agency. We sell Malaysia, we attract investments. At the same time, we also promote domestic investment. But we are also very much involved in policy formulation. The industry forward blueprint by MITI, there's a lot of inputs from MIDA. The Industry 4.0 revolution, Industry 4.0 by MOSTI, that was, we were also consulted. When you talk about digital economic blueprint, MIDA's input was there. So that is number one. Number two, coming up with policy framework and whatnot is one thing. Yeah, I think Malaysia is good at that. I think we have one of the, most comprehensive blueprints in the world, in every aspect, I would say. But what is more important is translating those policy framework into actionable plan. Okay, in terms of programs, in terms of incentive schemes, for example. So again, you would have noticed that MIDA is very much involved in coming up with the guidelines as well as providing the incentives. In every budget, if you look at the budget announcement, you will find that actually MIDA is always mentioned. Yeah. In terms of incentive that we provide, whether it is SAG, Smart Automation Grant, whether it is Automation Capital Allowance, or whether it is a High Impact Fund, modernization, whether it is a Domestic Investment Strategic Fund. Yeah. So there where we come up with the guidelines, we come up with the forms, we come up with the committee. On top of that, MIDA is the one who evaluates, and of course, end of the day, we issue the approval letter. That is the second. The third is also we are very concerned about the infrastructure, as I mentioned just now. Yeah, one of the areas that MIDA was very much involved in making sure that we are able to attract investments, or at least get our local players to move up the value chain, adopt Industry 4.0, is to have a proper infrastructure. For example, the industrial parks that we have actually now upgraded. That's number 3. Then we come to talent. This is the major challenge that we face. I always tell my team, I always tell all potential investors, I think convincing an investor to invest in Malaysia is the easiest thing to do. But the tough part is actually to get the right talent, because now we are talking to companies with technology, with this tomorrow's technology, future technology. MIDA is always ahead of the curve. ATNS project in Malaysia, they are producing what? Not just IC substrate, they are producing the next generation IC substrates. For that, you need to have the right talent, isn't it? So therefore, we are working with the universities, the colleges, we are talking to the vice chancellors, trying to make sure that their education, our education system is actually in line with the future technology that we are bringing in. Not only that, we are also now involving directly through this MADC program, for example, to produce IoT generalists. And then we are also doing through our Advanced Technology and Research and Development division in MIDA to make these companies, the SMEs in Malaysia, with the service providers, isn't it? All these Industry 4.0 service providers that we have. And then we are trying our level best to try to see whether can we do the matchmaking, help them, especially the local SMEs. We can talk about Industry 4.0. End of the day, the local guys out there, all this sounds Greek to them, Their machine is not even 2.0, not even, 1.0. So what are we talking here? So we need to go to their level. Make sure that we can install some kind of equipments or whatever, make the machine smarter, so that you can then read some data, and after that gradually, do this intervention, readiness assessment study and whatnot, try to find where they are, and then help them up slowly to adopt Industry 4.0. It's more like a baby steps, I would say. Now, so these are the 5 areas that MIDA is very clearly involved in terms of getting our local companies to adopt Industry 4.0. Now, in terms of incentives, of course, there are some major incentives that MIDA provides. One of it was the Smart Automation Grant, which was, I think, bestseller, put it that way, because there's so many companies who are applying for it. It's a 1 million matching grant that was given. That means if you spend 2 million, we are willing to give, the government is willing to subsidize 1 million. It's a matching grant, of course, 50-50, but it is meant for more Malaysian majority, 51%. So that is number one. Number two is another intervention fund. Intervention fund is interesting, as I think many of us are aware, where you need to do a readiness assessment first. We evaluate where you are, look at the gaps, and then that report will tell you what needs to be done for you to adopt Industry 4.0. It could be talent, it could be process, it could be technology. And the amount is not much. It's about 500,000, but 70-30 matching grant. 70% is borne by the government, 30% by the company. And on top of that 70%, 30% is given as an upfront. Actually, I don't believe, personally, I don't believe in giving cash money upfront. But because of Industry 4.0, because of the cost involved, we decided, okay, never mind. We can give 30%. After all, these are Malaysian-owned companies. And of course, in the recent budget, there was a digital ecosystem acceleration scheme. This is actually, we want companies to invest in infrastructure in order for us to go into full force into digital, Industry 4.0. So we are coming up with the guidelines and whatnot. So that would be another interesting component of our effort. And finally, I would like to say this, which I think this is much more important for me. Doing collaboration, talking to existing companies, facilitation, more to facilitate, because we have so many Industry 4.0 providers out there, Malaysian companies as well as top-notch foreign companies like Siemens, like Bosch. They can come and also help the bigger companies, the mid-tier companies, or even the local small service providers are willing to assist our companies actually to go into Industry 4.0. One example, John, is Hexa Food. We were there. MIDA was there to help them to adopt Industry 4.0. And another company is what you call a Sydney Cake House. These are not multinational corporations, but they are already there. They are also going global as well. So this is where we actually assist them, handhold them, and make sure that they adopt Industry 4.0. And we also work with multinational corporations. For example, like Western Digital. They have gone into Lighthouse, isn't it? They are the only company in Malaysia who has this status of Lighthouse in Malaysia. And they are quite end-to-end kind of services that they provide. So their suppliers, let's say Malaysian companies, who are supplying to them and whatnot, and we want to help them. We want to help our local suppliers to actually to be able to adopt the Industry 4.0 technologies in terms of IoT, in terms of cybersecurity and whatnot. There where MIDA comes in, and then see whether we can provide all these incentive facilities that we have in our toolkit, and then to see whether they can then upgrade themselves and then be able to supply to multinational corporations such as Western Digital. Thank you, John.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Stephen. Yeah, I think a lot of initiatives. I think personally, I'm also on the panel for the Smart Automation Grant, and I've personally witnessed a lot of SMEs benefiting from it through the grant that has been given out. But despite that, a lot of the companies are still, I would say, I'm not sure for whatever reasons, are still slow in transforming themselves. Dato Gan, from FMM's perspective, why do you think some of these companies are still slow in transforming digitally themselves? Yeah.
I think basically I'll just answer one of the questions which Mr. Siva has posed on the issue of getting the 4.0 grant. I think at one time many of our companies that actually applied for this grant actually took a long time. Some took more than 6 months to get an answer, some actually took more than 1. So we hope that we understand that a lot of process, but we hope that the government could actually expedite this issue to enable companies to be able to know the answer. Otherwise, there are actually so many other grants. Okay, back to the question of the biggest challenges which SMEs on digitalization. Why is it they're keeping so slow? I think before the advent of the 4.0 and also digitalization, I think the members, many member companies have actually had great interest, especially the SMEs, getting themselves to transform their companies into the digitalization world. But again, from the research which we found, that finance and employee skills and the adequate technology, it is a problem. Despite that, we understand that the government also assists as much as 50% of SMEs. But they also found that this is actually a key hindrance in terms of finance. So, and 60% of the SMEs were actually unaware of these financial options which is actually open to them. And as much as 44% of the SMEs cited the backbone issues was high, the price is too high and the speed is too low. And then you also find that in many of the industrial parks around the whole of Malaysia, not many of them are actually getting Wi-Fi, broadband, And I think there is some monopoly placed on the telcos, whereby I think they need to ensure that all this unified and Wi-Fi will have to be properly worked out in this industrial estate before you even think of the bigger picture. Okay, I think under FMM, during the MCO period, and as you know, that a lot of companies are actually losing this business, and we actually encourage them probably to go from offline to online. And again, from the MIER report for the first half of 2020, many of the respondents have been moving from offline to online, and the response that came back, as much as the 36% responded yes, move online. 71% noted that there is actually an increase in the business. So I think in future, to ensure growth in the digital economy, Malaysia at this moment in time, we lack fast broadband, and the adoption of this wireless broadband has got to be in the picture now. And as you know, that there is now lack of market competition. That is a problem, and that is the reason that actually lead to the high. Telcos will not operate in areas which are low telcos who operate in areas which are high. Okay, and also we also find out that because this is the lack of the know-how on how companies would know how to transform themselves to digitalize, especially in the workforce. And companies have got to be literate, Otherwise, especially the SMEs, they know nothing. And the fourth one that we found that it was actually the areas of so-called the budget. None of them actually had the money to. I think that's about it.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Dato. I think the awareness is important. So maybe a good point to see how we can promote some of these grants, incentives, And I think the technical know-how is also very important. And I know personally, MDEC in the SAG Smart Automation Grant, they actually have a list of panel system integrators, that the SMEs can actually appoint to help them, in the understanding and not just providing the grant. So I think maybe thanks for pointing that out. And I think we need to promote more of what's available to make people become more aware.
I think it's also important for the private sector and the public sector to drive the industry 4.0. I think you must have some kind of a financial package. Must be given to SMEs to enable them to conduct R&D. So and some of the approach to the problem is to ensure that there is high quality of infrastructure. Otherwise, if you do not have that, how is it going to operate? Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, accessibility very important. And you brought a very good point, which is the next question to Encik Badrulhisyam, right? How can you ensure quality and also bring along, right, the entire supply chain within MMC's group? So and you also talked about earlier, MMC's digital transformation programs and how MMC is pushing, right, the technology agenda, but not only within the MMC companies, but how are you guys also trying to help support your suppliers to also be part of the transformation? Badrul?
Thank you, John. I think this is a topic that suddenly is hot during the pandemic supply chain, because I think suddenly everybody realized that they are part of this global decentralized supply chain. So and I concur with Mr. Siva just now when you talk about some of the players, they're talking about you must adopt this technology for survival. But in our case, I think we are taking the position that we've got to do this as a key business advantage rather than trying to survive alone, because obviously we are competing at the global logistics supply chain stage. So I think this is interesting because across our partners, suppliers, and customers, I think before this, over the last many years, people talk about just in-time delivery of stock. But now everybody is planning for redundancy or just in case, because obviously you don't want to be disrupted, the manufacturers, the consumers. So this is something that we are pushing as well. And yes, as we are only one part of the biggest supply chain, you are right, John. So it's about making sure our supplier, our customers, our partners are together with us embarking on the digital infrastructure. So internally, ourselves, of course, we are encouraging a lot of engagement with our partner, customer, and suppliers, where instead of manually calling us, emailing us for info and data, so it's about accessing the customer portal that we have made available, and to a certain extent, even encouraging direct API connection between our system and theirs. So this is helpfully making sure that the information are shared across the value chain faster, and everybody has the same info and data at the same time. So this is obviously talking about planning for efficiency and tracking. So if you talk about on the logistics side, yes, it's about tracking exactly where are the cargo, where are the fleets, and this is the information that our customer will find it useful. So this is about pushing the data that they need rather than trying to force them to actually adopt the technology in itself. So obviously, with much more decentralized data and stuff, we have developed actually mobile apps for the staff, and we are rolling out this to the customer as well. And eventually, I think if we talk about procurement with the suppliers, yes, e-procurement is being implemented. This is for much more competitive and real-time price discovery. And I think even to our customers and even on the property side, we have seen that virtual site visit is a reality now. So that's something that I think everybody across the value chain and willing to adopt. So I think it's making sure that our partners, our customers, our suppliers see the value of investing in this so that they become more competitive.
Thanks. Okay, we are really running out of time, and there are a few topics that we would like to cover. Maybe let's quickly move on to the last topic first, and then we'll come back to Prof. Satesh. I think just now, Prof, you mentioned, right, the importance of sustainability for the industries, and we have seen that the sustainability and climate change has become, a global agenda for everyone. And separately, 2 weeks ago, Malaysia also committed, right, the goal to being carbon neutral nation, and also achieve net zero emissions, by 2050 at the recent United Nations Climate Change Conference in Glasgow. First question to Dato Gan first, back to you. Is this important point that the FMM is tackling in terms of sustainability, and how some of these things are taken up by the manufacturing community, Dato Gan?
Thank you, Paul. Okay, I think back in 2019, FMM actually started this Sustainable Development Committee that was under the chairmanship of Wan Sri Anwar. At this moment in time, there's been a change of chairmanship, and now we have none other than Nestle, who is Guan Aranos, who actually has assumed the role since 2020. Basically, we have identified 4 areas. One is reforestation. The other one is circular economy. The third is renewable energy. Fourth is sustainable supply. So we hope that all these activities which have been planned, we hope that as a result of all these activities which have been planned out before the pandemic period, to continue as outlined in the Malaysia Plan 12. So on the topic of reforestation, the best way forward is to reduce the amount of CO2 emission. I think the best way to do that is actually to plant trees. So at this moment in time, I think the activities which FMM have actually, the government has actually launched a 100 million tree planting campaign starting from 2020 to 2025, just before the MCO. We managed to organize the mangrove replanting activity, which was held in collaboration with Nestle. This was actually done in Taman Rekreasi, YBhg, which is Kampong Sikatang, Telok Panglima, Garang Selatan. So the president and the whole group of people will witness the opening of this. So we also recognize that in order for this sustainability to be widely discussed, there should be great opportunities for companies to invent the ways to adopt to the new opportunities, for new technologies to ensure that this will actually keep. As you know, that the climate issue will not go. I think talking is easy enough, but implementation will be very, very tough. And I believe that many of the companies in the world, like people like Apple, Starbucks, and all the big companies, they have a time frame, on how the implementation can be done. And even in China itself, I think they also predicted by 2060 they should be able to adopt something. And since Malaysia have already agreed that by 2050 that we will take this number, by 2030, I think we will take at least 45% of the thing it can be. I think the important aspects that I would like to talk about today will be the IPMCs, the Industrial Park Management. We also understand that the government have come up with this eco-industrial park. This eco-industrial park will be facilitated in 5 states. Each state will have 3 industrial estates. We're trying to convert these 3 industrial estates into eco-industrial park. And I know it's a huge task. We have identified, for instance, in Tapa, which are the areas that we should be doing it. The one which are doing it will be Ipoh, there's one in Ipoh, there's one in Setiawan. The other one will also be, as to the rest of the other states, not too sure how they do that. I think there are many other companies who have actually come in to develop this eco park. I think, namely, some of the old industrial estates that we have. We are talking about probably 2030, 2040, 2050, implementing all these changes. The old industrial parks will never be able to do so. And the only way to do it is we have to create new industrial parks, new eco parks, whereby there is facilitation, gas, of unified, of everything which is actually good. Access of these industrial parks, the old ones, there's no access of gas. There's no access of unified. I mean, it is so bad. So unless we transform ourselves from the old industrial park to the new industrial park, with the way forward, these are the companies or the factories which are giving off greenhouse gas. This, I think, is the time that we must do it.
Yep.
I think there are also other companies in Johor who are actually doing it. I think the people like the Frontal Industrial Park, the City Eco Park, and then we have the Kulim High Tech Park. I think they are doing it very, very well. The BioX cell Malaysia from Iskandar Putri Johor. And we hope that the way forward that we have to create new industrial parks in the future. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Yeah, I think the supporting infrastructure is very important. Very quickly, I know we are running out of time. Very quickly, Encik Badrul, maybe in a minute, can you explain, what is the agenda, the sustainability agenda for MMC?
I think, John, at the end of the day, sustainability is something that a lot of the Malaysian companies, ourselves included, we have been doing that. But I think we haven't been communicating this vision, this commitment clearly. So I think internally for us, it's not just about improving these matrices and measurement, but it's also about developing internally the sustainability-oriented culture so that collectively, overall, we are contributing to the UN SDG goals, but those that are related to our current businesses. So yes, I think similar to other companies, we would be coming out with and communicating our ESG commitment daily, because now it's not just a matter of doing it. We have been doing it, but if you don't actually tell the world about it, you're not counted. So obviously, this is something that industry player like us, something that we have to do. So go out there and communicate all our ESG commitment, John.
Yeah, thanks. That's very important because big conglomerates like you guys need to lead by example. The communication is important so that people can also follow. Back to Mr. Siva, clearly just now, Dato Gan mentioned, we need to also help support, the industries. Being the custodian, right, for manufacturing investments in the country, I assume, MIDA, has this on its agenda. Mr. Siva? Sorry, you're on mute. Yeah.
Can you be more specific in terms of what? Is it on R&D? Are you referring to?
No, what is the is sustainability
Oh, I see. Okay,
a topic on a topic for MIDA to push forward? Yeah.
Well, actually, you see, when we were, even in the 1990s, I think late 1990s or early 2000, that was the time when we really decided to go into high-tech kind of industries. So there where we came up with all these guidelines for high-tech companies, strategic industries, yeah. And since then, what we have done is that we do have this cost-benefit analysis. That means each and every project that we want to bring into Malaysia, or those that we want to give tax incentives. So we really look into all the elements, and one of it is, of course, environmental related. So we look at all these parameters, and then we see where they stand, and then only we will try to give them the best incentives available. Yeah. So that has always been there. But of course, over the last couple of years, you have this ESG as well as SDG standards, yeah, being applied, and of course, these will then be translated, yeah, as we approve new projects moving forward. Meaning, this would be a criteria, for example, for the companies to actually to avail themselves to the best incentive that we have. That's number one. Number two, on our own, as you know, MIDA has been actually attracting, propagating, I would say, yeah, investments in the green space for a very long time. Yeah, there are 6 areas that we look at. One, yeah. Recently, Western Digital was telling, I was in one panel discussion. They were saying that, I was a bit surprised why Western Digital is involved in the green space, and they were telling that their customers want their products not to be produced using what they call non-green energy, even hydro for that matter. They say hydro energy is not green. Mini hydro maybe, not the big ones. So, having said that, so we are looking at companies using biomass, for example, to produce high value added products, green chemicals, so and so forth. That's one part. The second part is green energy itself, because we've already committed ourselves in the Paris Agreement. We have committed ourselves to go carbon neutral. So how do you achieve that? So you need to increase the renewable energy mix, isn't it? Currently, ours is only 18%. We want to reach 31% in few years' time, and then to hit, I believe, 40% by 2040. Yeah. Now, in order for that, MIDA is very much involved in providing a lot of incentives for solar companies, isn't it? That's number one. Biomass, biogas, mini hydro. Energy conservation, for example, we are also providing some incentive for that. But this incentive has been there for some time. It was not just introduced last year or one. Green building is another area. We want real estate, when they build buildings, it has to be green. Yeah. And then we have waste management, as mentioned by Dato just now. I agree. We need to have more eco parks where we have world-class waste management companies coming in and then set up this kind of recycling, a more circular economy kind of industrial park, waste management activities. With regards to industrial parks, I do agree. I totally agree. We have by far very few world-class industrial park with all these features. The one that mentioned by Dato, I agree, Kulemaitai Park, iPark, In fact, they don't call it industrial park. They call it industrial resort down south in Johor. I was really impressed to look at some of the industrial park in Malaysia. These are the parks that we are looking at moving forward. Yeah, world-class of industrial park. Then we are talking about electric vehicles. MIDA is also promoting investments into electric vehicles. That will definitely contribute in our efforts to reach carbon neutral. Yeah. Of course, we would love to have Tesla in Malaysia. Yeah, we would love to have all the system integrators in Malaysia. Today, the semiconductor industry in Malaysia is the heart of any electric vehicle in the world. Yeah, we are producing sensors and whatnot. Yeah, so I believe that in years to come, we can be, a major player in the electric vehicle industry, if not the production, but definitely in the parts and components and all the services that goes into this. And of course, finally, green certification is another area that we are promoting. Yeah. Now, beside all these efforts that we have done, just for your information, just my last words, we do have a dedicated division, Green Tech division in MIDA, which was set up, I think, maybe 15 years ago. And today we have another unit called Circular Economy Unit. We have set up in MIDA, and we are also doing strategic papers. For example, hydrogen is another area that we are looking at. Moving forward, maybe that's where we should be. Yeah, so we need to be ahead of the curve with regards to a green agenda, John. Thank you.
Thanks. Last question to Professor Satesh. Right, earlier you mentioned there are a lot of research and the 10 grand ideas that are being pushed forward and being researched. Do you see some of these things, especially in the sustainability or even in technology in general? Do we see that a lot of people are saying that the industry don't really understand the research institutions, or the institutions don't really understand the industry. So do we see the gap closing in terms of helping people to adopt technology as well as sustainability technology? Is the advancement of technology helping the gap to be closed?
Thanks, John. I think very quickly I could give my thoughts on the question that you've just posed. I think just to kind of reiterate what was said by Mr. Siva as well. Heriot-Watt University, as a global university, we tend to work on addressing sustainability and also the climate change emergency through essentially transitioning to green energy. We're working on circular economy, and we're also working on how we can move from more traditional engineering solutions to more nature-based solutions. But these initiatives really would only work if we are in close partnership with industry. So yes, definitely there is a gap that exists, but I think that gap can be further narrowed. I think I personally advocate the development of industry immersion programs, even at the level of undergraduate students, where they could essentially involve themselves in real life projects, solving real life challenges with industry, collaboration with industry in terms of funding, especially for undergraduate education. For example, with us, we have our Dato Sri Michael Yam Chartered Institute of Building bursaries on offer for deserving students. We partner different organizations actually to offer scholarships for the underprivileged community. So I think such collaborations at the student experience level will grow into further collaboration at the research and innovation level, where we would really see the industry and institutions like my university working hand in hand to take advantage of technology and advancement to innovate. So a quick summary. Thanks, John.
Thanks. So thank you very much. That was the last question. On behalf of Star Media Group and Roland Berger, would sincerely like to thank our esteemed panelists for joining us in this session today. Thank you very much once again. Also like to thank all our participants and listeners who dialed in. Really hope there were some good takeaways, some tips on what to do next and how to get assistance, for example, from MIDA, from MDAC, MITI, etc. And I hope that it has contributed, to your further understanding on digitalization and the sustainability agenda for your company. So thank you once again to everyone, and passing the floor back to the MC. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. That was the industry panel discussion of the Manufacturing and Construction BizCon breakout track, and I hope that you guys enjoyed it as much as we did. I really personally loved the fact that it ended on such an important note, such as sustainability. So thank you so much, Dato Gan, Dr. Namasivayam, and Sheikh Badrul, and John for such an engaging, insightful, and informative discussion. It is such a great honor for all of us to have you powering Summit program.